That's where I'm at, I can't remember.
Well, so intrinsic is when something is good in itself. Extrinsic is when something is good because it's useful for something else.
So they
Class-
would be extrinsic.
Yeah, so it would be extrinsic in this case. Money is the classic example of this. You know, $10, you know, can't eat it.
But gotta have it.
You know, it's not like it's gonna, it's not gonna get you a ticket to heaven or, you know, any of that kind of thing. It's good for something else, because then you can get something else. And even if you're buying something else, like, we might argue over a car, you know, like, you know, if you're buying a car with money, you know, is the car intrinsically good or extrinsically good? It's extrinsically good when the reason you have it is so that you could travel to work or school or take the kids to their game, or, you know, so it's utile, it's useful, and it's a good car if it's doing all those things properly, right? And we talked about it being expensive to run or cheap to run, you know, I mean, all the variety of things you think of. But for the most part, a car you think of as an extrinsic good, whereas you might argue that it's an intrinsic good. Can you? If it's like you just enjoy driving it for the sake of it. You know what I mean? If it's like your thing, you love this particular car and you love to just take it down Highway 1 or something, or Route 66, or where, you know, just driving it is a pleasure for you, in which case you might think of that as an intrinsic good. I think you could argue that. So that's, I think, what he's, you know, the first thing. But I mean, so when you're thinking about the difference, intrinsic goods are better. The extrinsic goods are useful because they enable us to get intrinsic goods.
What about something that's like extringent? I can't say that word.
Extrinsic.
If it's used, like for the example of money, if it's used to buy something that is not good, it
Right.
would still be good for making that purchase. But what if, like, opposite
What you
end of the
bought
spectrum,
was-
let's say someone paying someone to kill somebody, you know?
Right.
That act that it's resulting in isn't good, but it is still good for making that transaction happen. Would it still be considered extrinsic?
Extrinsic, yeah. I think for the purpose you have of being able to get that, but of course then the evil that you've purchased would be bad, but it wouldn't change the fact that money is good for getting something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so getting money for the sake of money, we all know that's, you know, I mean, we've got lots of stories that tell us that that's a dumb thing, you know, just, you know, for the money for the sake of money alone. You know, we've got, you know, the Midas touch, you know, how that story teaches us that gold, you know, isn't, you know, what makes life important, you know, because of course he ends up turning his daughter into gold and his favorite bird into gold. You know, he goes to eat a sausage and it turns to gold, and you can't eat a gold sausage, etc. Shouldn't even eat gold. You know, there's some certain medicinal traditions that think gold is somehow good for you. And in fact, I remember when my mom had arthritis, they would inject gold into her joints. And that helped relieve some of the pressure or something. I don't know how that works. But yeah, so gold is not intrinsically good, unless, of course, it turns out in your particular instance. I mean, I'm not sure if this really works, where you're just really thrilled with, say I go to happens when I forget how to spell stuff. I think there was something golden there.
Secret Petal of Thought.
Maybe not.
And the God of Wisdom.
One of these. No. I know I've seen gold stuff in different places. I'll just let this one run. But I mean, so you could find art, and I think I would be puzzled over art in the same way that you wouldn't say that art is an extrinsic good, unless you're thinking in terms of its resale value. You know, if it's an investment for you, then that's an extrinsic good. If, on the other hand, you just love it for itself. Does that make sense? That you're now thinking of it as an intrinsic good.
An emotional attachment to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, the same thing, you know, you think of your love for your fellow family members, for your fellow man, that's an intrinsic good, that wouldn't be an extrinsic good. Whereas if you're like in love of the country for what it can do for you, and not what you could do for your country,
Yeah.
right?
You're going
You know, right? You know, that's, you know, oh, so what's the difference? Intrinsic, extrinsic. But so, you know, I can see we could have problems trying to figure out which is which on that. I really should watch all those again. It's been a long time since I watched them. I've mentioned this before, right? This is at the University of Pennsylvania Art and Archaeology Museum, which is right across from Franklin Field, if you've ever been to Philadelphia. I think it's on 36th. Huh?
Only to the airport.
Well, it's not far from the airport. Well, no, it's far from the airport. You can't walk. You have to take a car.
Well, it was a military.
That's gold. Okay, so here's the gold thing I was thinking of. Now, I would not want that so that I could melt it down
Yeah.
and get money for it. Although,
It's worth more than the form it is in there.
oh yeah, it's worth more for the artifact that it is than it would be if you reason I cut the heads off of things with this is the camera I used for this back in 2013, I guess. But you know, the trouble when you're using this, right, is if you're like carrying it and you're aiming it at stuff, you're not going like this and see, so I go by and then I post it and I realize I cut the head off of every dang thing. And
At least it's not as bad as my mother's first video when she went to Australia for the first time.
I did one of those.
I called it vertigo video. She was moving that camera so fast. Oh my God. He was almost making you sick.
Well, my thinking was I wanted to see the whole museum, and if you wanted to pause at this, you could hit pause and just look at the specifics of it. But the very first video I ever made with a Super 8 camera that we got, we were at the Berlin Zoo. and we spent the day, and the video was 15 minutes long, because it's tape or film, right? And you push the button, you run a little, push the button, run a little, push the button, and it's all one video, right? Well, it turned out that every time I took pictures of like the kids or the animals, all I got were their butts. So I got all the kids all looking at something, and I've got their butts. The animals walking away, butts, right? The one different was
Tang Dynasty.
2 goats
618
were
Dynasty.
doing this, and they were butting their heads together. So it was like butts, 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 butting, butts, butts, butts. That was just hilarious. But no, I've never converted that over to digital. That would be hilarious, so I should try to do that sometime. Yeah, if you ever get there, I think you have to pay to go in now. And there's a parking, you can't just like park on the street. There's a parking lot, the U of P parking lot, that you could go in and you just pay a couple bucks to park there and just walk right in. And I guess it's maybe $10 a piece or something to go walk around, but it's well worth it if you're in the area. But so, intrinsic versus extrinsic. Next is the issue associated with the kinds of, I'll skip sticking to this because otherwise we'll never get to the other articles. But so you have kind of the Platonic point that certain classes of people prefer and like certain things. So the lower class that Plato talks about, they like physical things. So everybody, of course, that likes those kinds of physical things likes pizza, likes money, likes all that sort of thing. You can actually have too much pizza, obviously, right? So that's, notice something Plato, as far as I recall, never said anything about. Because for Plato, if you have the good is, from what everything comes from, then the more good you have, the better off you are. But Aristotle points out that when you're eating something like pizza or you're swimming, you might enjoy swimming, but you only swim for sun tanning, right? Obvious thing. You go on the beach, you lie down in the sun. If you stay there all day, you will die, right? So you can get too much of a good thing and not enough of it. I mean, if you need food in order to not be hungry, you have to have enough food that works out, right? So plus there's a problem with that. Physical things that we need of that sort of good always experience a lack. There's never enough for everyone. There's always, the wealthy get their share, and the poor sit there watching them, wishing that they had some of that. That's, the restaurant experience, with the glass window and everybody sitting in there having sumptuous meals and everything, and the poor are standing outside looking in the window going, and making faces, because, and every once in a while the butler goes, not the butler, but the head waiter goes out, sweeps them away or something. You know how there's never enough for everybody. So that's a problem with physical things that we like. Physical goods, they're usually extrinsic. Most of food you can enjoy just for the sake of the food. But for the main purpose for us to eat food is for health, right? And health is an intrinsic good. It's good for you to be healthy, period, right? So there are pretty clear things about that. But the problem with those kinds of physical goods is that there's always a lack. There's never enough for everyone. And so there's a problem with distribution, right? Who gets what? Right? Then the next social class, the kinds of goods that we like, are social goods. Remember Plato, spirit, honors and things of that sort. No problem with Aristotle interpreting these as substance, because all of them are actions, and the actions and the rewards, the cheers of the people, those are all physical things. So he has no trouble interpreting all of that as a physical thing, but it's not the same as a car. Loving someone and saying I love you, right? That is not the same as the physical thing as having a piece of pizza, right? You can express it. You can express your love by baking for someone and things of that sort, but the love itself, that is an intrinsic good, and that is physical. But at the same time, notice it still has now a limitation. There's never enough of it to go around. The Olympics, everybody wants to win. If you saw the American-Canadian hockey game the other night, last night, just down to, tie score 2-2, right? And did you see it? And then they get to the overtime, and they're still tied at the end of the overtime, and then they go to what they call the shootout, which was basically, everybody taking pot shots at the poor goalie, trying to protect the goal, and then when it got right down to it, the Americans got one, and as soon as they got that one, then they won. And so all the Americans are all, how they do, hockey players, they slam into one another at the speed that would actually destroy every part of my body and cheer. They think that's a wonderful thing, that they just crush one another, and they're all posing for pictures. And then the camera pans over to the poor Canadians. Every single one of them is sitting there like suffering miserably. You think, man, there's something wrong with a sport that leaves the losing team feeling so. In fact, the one, when they received their silver medal, she was so upset she rejected it. She was so mad. But then they fixed it, made her take it back and stuff. But can you imagine being so angry you didn't want silver?
Well.
But if you think about it, that's pretty clear. Even though this is an honor, and you think, I've seen places where every student gets a ribbon or a certificate of attendance. You showed up, yay! I remember my granddaughter, getting her award. She worked really hard. Sorry, I don't want to make you choke on your drink, but you can imagine, yeah. What does that mean? That means didn't accomplish much, but boy, she worked very hard, to get this award. And I better be careful because some years she might actually see this. I don't think so, but that's like an award for just being alive, basically, and showing up to school. So we can give people awards to make them feel good. Everything in that school. This is. Willow something.
Willow Crest?
Willow Crest, yes. Everything in that building just emphasizes that you are loved and you are the best thing ever, and every student counts, and all that sort of thing, and you think, wow, this is not preparing a single one of these children for life,
No.
As soon as you get out that door, as I'm sure you've all discovered, everyone's out to screw you, as best they can. Of course, is why the more education you get, the better, because the smarter you are, the more you can screw others instead of be screwed yourself. No, I'm sorry.
Or avoid those who are trying to screw you.
Yes.
There's no thank you.
Except we elect them into office.
Yeah.
Oh, well, sorry about that.
That often comes down to the lesser two evils anyway. whether you have a billionaire there or someone who the rules don't apply to.
So there's a lack of social goods as well.
Yeah.
And that makes it rough on everybody, because that means that everybody competes for the honors and the love. You know, you love that person, you love that person, they don't love you back. You know, that's, rough on everyone. But there is an intrinsic good that is limitless. And so he ends up hitting, of course, the same good that Plato does, and that is wisdom, education. You can learn something, and it's just like when I have a lit candle, and you take your candle and you light your candle by means of my candle. Now your candle is lit too, and I haven't lost any of my own light. Right? That's candle metaphor, right? But you get the idea. Knowledge is the kind of thing where we can have as many copies of it as we want, and everybody could be satisfied with it. It's limitless. It's just, of course, being interested enough in it that you go and you learn that. And, you can see how during the Middle Ages, how, the common people, they deal with physical things. The noble class, they're the warriors, they're the ones that fight for honors and things. It doesn't really work out that they're not going to have stuff, although if you think about it, they're sacrificing their bodies for the good of the protection of the community. But the ones that really have it, best in a way are the ones that can concentrate basically all day studying theology, that which is not just theology for them, that was all of learning at the time. So the best kind of knowledge, or the best kind of good, is that which the soul enjoys the most. And when you get right down to it, his definition of man is not just the featherless biped that was, of course, the joke, but man the knower. All men wish to know, and the main thing about human beings is that we're interested in knowledge, and we're also the political animal. So the next book is about the kinds of communities they are. So this, in a sense, is similar to Plato's Republic. The goal is to try to establish the best kind of state. And we have, as usual, he defines them as types. And so he breaks them down as 1, 2, or 3. I might have already talked about this when we talked about the Republic, because he follows suit. Remember, he's got a lot of things that are different from Plato, his teacher, but a lot of things are the same. The values especially seem to be pretty close. But when we look at the kinds of governments there are, we have the rule of one, the rule of, I guess, a few, and then many or all. Depends on who you mean by all. For the Greeks, it was never everyone, of course, but in a sense of the deme. The people. But who were the people in that case? They weren't the slaves, weren't the women. They were the propertied men, adult men, roughly 500 in Athens, that kind of thing. Athens had roughly 25,000 people altogether, but if you say it's a democracy but only 500 people have a vote, that's not exactly what we would have meant by a democracy. But then even our democracy, I happened to watch the Lincoln movie, you know, the recent one that won awards, not Lincoln the Vampire Slayer, I don't know where that came from, but the, you know, the climax of that film, before of course he ends up being shot at the theater and everything, was the voting on the 13th Amendment, and how just on the edge that whole process was, you know, that bribing all these people, you know, to get them to vote for it, offering them positions and all sorts of things to get them over the edge. A lot of them that voted for it really didn't want to vote for it. You know, they were horrified by the thought of women eventually getting the vote. What? Arr, you know. You know, what about the slaves? You know, are you going to give them property? No. You know, what about the vote? No, there's no way. You know, etc. You know, we're just going to make them legally under the law equal, right? So that they can't be owned anymore. You know. So of course, we think of our own democracy. There's a lot of people that can't vote, and you have to wonder. You know, the next time we vote here, it's all paper ballot. You're aware of that, right? Right. So no waking up and sometime that day stopping by your polling place. No, you instead, March 13th or so, they will be mailing out paper ballots, and you have to send it either with a stamp or stop by one of the receptacles that they've set up. I don't even know where those will be. I don't know. Maybe there are still going to be polling places. I don't know. I heard someone say like the Luzak Library and maybe the one at the Spine at the UAA might still be a physical place where you could go in. I don't know.
Or maybe that's just where they'll have the receptacles.
That might be, you know.
Because people are so used to going to those places anyways.
But there's all sorts of questions about how this is going to impact us. Do you think it's going to enable more people in town to vote? Or less?
Well, if they bother to take it home from the post office.
Yeah, if people don't see it as junk mail and just not realizing what it is, I mean, that's the majority of postal mail these days.
Have to read it, yeah, have to read it and fill it out and put it in the envelope and pay the stamp. Boy, in their infinite wisdom, they decided that you'd actually have to put a stamp on this.
You gotta pay to vote.
You gotta pay to vote. Or know where to take.
And have the ability to get there, though. Some
Yeah.
people don't.
Interesting. But then, you know, if it actually encourages more people to vote that normally wouldn't, the question then is, of course, you're going to have more people voting who disagree with me. And the main thing about, you know, having a democracy is that everybody should vote and all vote and agree with me. You know, as long as they agree with me, then I want their vote. Right? If they don't agree with me, well,
They don't need
I'm
to
not
vote.
encouraging you to vote, you know, because you disagree with me, right? So what's going to happen with this? You know, we're going to get weird results that we've, you know.
Well, and the question raises too is like, is that going to make it easier for falsifying votes? Because, I mean, you see how many times there's the wrong mailing address on file for people. So what happens if you move into a new apartment and you get the ballot for the person who lived there previously and decide to send it in as their vote? I mean, they're not going to have any way to know the
Well,
difference.
you have to sign it.
Yeah, I get people mail from Soldotnet.
Exactly. Like, there's going to be no way, unless they're going to sit
Street
there and
addresses
manually
to
look at
my
everything
P.O.
and
box.
compare the signature, and that's to say that they even have something to compare it to.
Well, so if we get all of these folks to vote, we could get some really dumb, I mean, because you know, if you think typical pyramid, these are the most knowledgeable, these that are less knowledgeable, less knowledgeable, less knowledgeable. Typically, it seems like these are the folks that will take the trouble to go and vote. If, because everybody's getting a ballot at home, these folks tend to vote as well, we're going to have Satan elected. Well, maybe not. Who the heck knows who these folks are gonna vote for, you know?
Obama.
Pardon?
Obama.
Obama, yeah. What was the expression? Oh, I can't remember it now, gosh. It's only been a year, and I can't remember the expression about Obama. That was neat though, I forget how it went. But so here's the point though that Aristotle's going to make, is that for the most part these folks are too dumb to vote, as far as he's concerned, right? And so this turns out to be the kind of government that will lead away from a sane government. He does think that a polity, right? So what the difference is, a polity is everybody's brilliant. Everybody has a wonderful education. Everybody's had philosophy with me. They're all brilliant, right? And we are all caring and concerned about our society. We've all been enlightened. We have clear ideas of what kind of government we want, and we know how to solve the problems and everything. And we end up then with a wonderful, absolutely ideal place to live, where everyone takes care of everybody else and all that sort of thing. Well, fat chance. I mean, that was the goal that Thomas Jefferson had, of making sure that education was something that was available for, the voters. I mean, that was, you need educated people to get this, right? But normally, the Deme is not that smart. One of the things that they pick up on pretty quickly is that they can vote themselves benefits. I think we all should get a Mercedes-Benz, don't you? But who's going to pay for it? Well, not me. We'll put that on our deficit, right?
Why not? Big enough already.
Yeah, let's everybody get a swimming pool in their backyard, heated, because of course we want to be able to use it during February,
You don't have to worry about it, our kids can take care of it.
Yeah, just put it on the deficit, the state will pay for it. We've got billions, $60 billion, well, no, we lost a couple billion in that week. We lost, $3 billion in the 1 week because of the fluctuation in the market. But, we've got billions. Let's buy everybody 2 cats in the yard, life used to be. No, that's a song. Forget it. But you get the idea. The end result is the government collapses because they go bankrupt. And so this kind of government leads to riots in the street. You spell chaos. It's a pretty chaotic way to spell chaos. So that leads to chaos. So this would be the goal of a government of many, or all. But typically what happens, this democracy turns out to be a horrible experience.
French
Doesn't
already
last
had
very
that
long.
experience.
Pardon?
The French have already had that experience.
Oh, yeah, well, that was
More than
Rousseau.
once.
Thanks to Rousseau. Here, we end up, well, I'll put monarchy over here. That way I'm keeping the good, so these are the good ones, the good versions of them. So monarchy, this is an enlightened monarch. So he's, or she's brilliant, has studied typically under Thomas Hobbes, as we will see, or you would in the modern course. So Aristotle comes back and Thomas Hobbes thinks a monarchy is the best form of government. This would be actually the best form of government if you could get a enlightened monarch, because he knows the best solution. He's concerned, he, she, or it is concerned with the community, with the nation. What's good for the monarch is good for the nation. So they make all the right decisions, and they make them quickly. There's no, stalemate in Congress. There's no, I mean, even when you've got relatively like-minded people that all have the best interests of the community at heart, you're still going to argue over whether or not taxes are a good thing or not. How do we pay for it? Let's just take it from the permanent fund. All that stuff is going to happen there. Whereas up here, the king just does whatever, or the queen just does whatever. Quickly, no committee, just instant, basic decision, no waiting. So this, in a sense, can be the ideal situation. But the trouble is, there are tyrants. So you get individuals, and we typically see that. That's much more common, where you have one person who's in charge, and they're absolute. We get, Muammar Gaddafi, or we get Assad in Syria. Depending, if you're an Alawite, he's absolutely the best thing ever. But if you're one of the other Syrians, boy, you're probably being bombed right now to smithereens, right? Because you're not on his clan, basically, right? Same thing that happened with Muammar Gaddafi. The Gaddafi clan was basically all that he cared about, right? And the Alawites are the clan that Assad cares about. If you're one of the others, they've had it, they've rebelled, and of course they've been being bombed for the last, 6 to 7 years. Yeah. It's not going to get better. I don't know why they don't just surrender and become Alawites. Would that be so hard? A lot better than being blown up, I think. Although I don't know if you're accepted that way. Just very glad that I live here, not there. But Sadat, Egypt, name the country, that seems to be, the normal course of events is that you have someone that doesn't seem to be really concerned about the best interest of the state as the best interest of their own clientele, clientelism or whatever you call it. And even if you do have a brilliant monarch, they get old. So I think Shakespeare's play, I might have mentioned King Lear, as a perfect example of, hey, what happens when the guy goes senile? He's still absolute monarch, but now he's making absolutely asinine orders. Get the unicorns down from the northwest pasture. What the hell's he talking about? We don't have any unicorns. Oh, I want to drink their blood. No, wait, that's a movie. We don't have, can't do that. Arr, kill everybody, because they've gone mad. The madness of King George. Remember that? That was a whole other thing. So this is absolutely the best possible, but almost guaranteed to slip into this direction. And that's not good.
Greed for power.
So the next one, I've got to put my good ones over here. So, an aristocracy. Did I spell that right? I spelled this far into the word and then my mind goes blank, the rest of it. Maybe that's
I don't even get that far.
Yeah.
We all know what you mean, so.
Yeah, and over here, you get a variety of them, and you can get a plutocracy, which is the rule of the wealthy. Not very good. I guess you can get a gerontocracy.
Like elders.
Yeah. You can get a theocracy. Now, I suppose in a way of thinking that's kind of an aristocracy. The trouble is they have to be believers in a particular dogmatic tradition. So like Iran would be the perfect example of that today. The beautiful constitution, the only thing is they only have one party. To get selected, you have to be approved by the imams. So basically it's a theocracy because they're not going to allow anyone to be candidates unless they meet their approval.
Towing the company line.
Right, right. So theocracy, a military, I forget what that one's called, but you can have like all generals, as your but by definition, Aristoi are the best. And what does Aristotle mean? He's the same as Plato's Republic. These are the wise that are then
These people
essentially
are educated.
and their interests are the best interests of the state. And so the decisions that they will make are not like Paul Manafort making sure that he's going to appoint somebody, help get somebody appointed to the cabinet, provided they lend him $16 million for his homes. Doesn't seem like a good thing. It's not to the benefit of the entire state. It's just to the benefit of Paul Manafort and the banker who's lent him the money. That's wrong. I mean that's the worry that what we've got right now is really a plutocracy because of Trump's associations with other billionaires and millionaires. I think virtually every member of the cabinet is a billionaire or millionaire at least. Is that right? Something like that.
I've been paying that close attention.
And yet he votes. I vote too, and I don't pay that
Well,
close attention.
yes, I voted for the obnoxious billionaire who's self-centered and walks around like Mussolini. However, I didn't want the social elitist who's the rule of law doesn't apply to her. She breaks the law and nothing happens.
I confess I voted for her. Oh, jeez. What a choice we had at the time, it was
If it would have been someone else that had the qualities, but without the elitist.
I have to admit though, when all, red state, 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 Pennsylvania, red state, I was like, I sat there laughing on the couch, thinking, my God, no one I know expected this,
You don't delete how many thousands of emails that you weren't supposed to use. You were using a private server to do classified communications, and her doing her job actually was,
Plus there's the
to
basket
her was
of
an annoyance.
deplorables, right?
Yes, the deplorables.
The deplorables.
Like just alienate 65 or 75% of the country.
Wasn't it? Who was it? Was it Meryl Streep? One of the actresses that came on.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're not a feminist, you're not diddly squat or something.
I didn't
Hillary
think
went,
that's
"You're
an
the
actress either. I'm still waiting for someone to leave the country who said they were going to leave the country.
Canada won't take them.
No, they all said they were coming to Alaska. They're leaving the United States, going to Alaska.
Well,
Did you
It's
see
funny
that?
though,
technically, it's still.
The night of the election though, the webpage for the government of Canada, they held information on immigrating to the country, was so inundated with requests that it actually broke down.
Broke down.
Yeah. Well, either way, it was a choice between two evils.
Exactly, the lesser of two evils.
And I chose the billionaire because
At least he's a billionaire, at least he made money.
he knows how to make deals and do things, okay?
Well, I can't,
And that's what the country needs right now.
My
Somebody
one
who can
brother-
make deals and do things.
my one brother, did plumbing work in one of the Trump hotels in Atlantic City, the casinos. And, Trump owes him $24,000, and he's never gonna get that money. I think it was 24,000, it was a lot. He's pissed off because basically that was written off as a bankruptcy thing. So he's just, he put all that work into the place and he's never gonna get any of that back, so. That brother doesn't like Trump.
Well, I wouldn't either.
My other brother is a liberal, I mean, you know, I try to be neutral, you know, you still gotta vote, you know, but, you know, my other brother is like, and the other one is, you know, but oddly, despite that, neither of them were Trump supporters. But, God,
Hence the football analogy. Just start talking about who you're gonna vote for president. You could be begging for somebody, please turn the game on.
much rather cheer for the Eagles or for the,
Yeah.
yeah. No one's gonna shoot you because you like the Eagles. So,
I have to admit, I only saw like the last minute and a half of that game. But it took 15 minutes to watch that last minute and a half. Wow.
you know, I grew up in Philadelphia, so hence all the videos of university. I don't know when I'm gonna visit Philadelphia again. It's probably not in the stars because, well, actually I don't do astrology, but so, best government realistically turns out to be an aristocracy. What he means by that is to have the wise, not an aristocratic class that are there because they're by birth the owners of all the property. That's not what the aristocracy was for Aristotle. So of course what happened with feudal Europe turning into nation states ruled by an aristocratic class that didn't get there by earned merit,
Yeah.
right? That was where you end up with kind of a, what broke down, if they had really been good aristocracies, chances are they would have been able to continue because they would have done really a much better job for their society, especially with the advance of the industrial period and the Enlightenment and all that. You know, they would have ended up being, I think, a much better situation. Instead, what we ended up with, of course, is this democratic experiment. And you know, the interesting thing there is, of course, it starts off with an aristocratic class.
Yeah.
Right, you know, so we didn't really have a democracy initially until theoretically the change took place with Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was the first populist elected president and turned right around and rescinded all of the treaties and things that the aristocratic class had agreed to, and of course that meant the Trail of Tears,
Yeah.
and you confiscation of all the Native American properties and everything. Because the populace wanted all of that stuff, whereas the educated classes thought of the natives as people too. You know, so all that went away. So that's considered to be when we became more, of course, of a real democracy. But then, of course, at the end of slavery, and then black men receiving the vote, that changed us still further. And then, of course, when did women get the vote?
I have no idea.
No one ever does, you know, I think it's 19? Shoot, I can't remember myself. What amendment was it?
No idea. I'm one of those horrible uneducated people.
Women's suffrage,
1919. Oh, I said 1919, didn't I?
Hmm.
yeah.
Phew. And I'm on camera. I'm also old and I don't remember stuff, but oh my goodness. 19th Amendment. That should be easy to remember. 19 and 19.